morning and welcome to the dissertation defense of Dennis Oates. Dennis currently serves as a professor of practice in the Department of Supply Chain Management at Marquette University. He holds a bachelor's in industrial engineering from Purdue University and an MBA from Loyola University, Chicago. Dennis brings more than 30 years of supply chain and logistics leadership experience with companies such as FedEx, Amazon, Sendle, and CloudSort. This industry perspective shapes both his research, which focuses on supply chain innovation and open innovation, and his approach to teaching, where he emphasizes connecting theory to real-world practice. I think you'll get to see all that in his dissertation defense today. So it's an honor and a privilege to introduce him today, and welcome to his dissertation defense. And without further ado, please welcome Dennis Oates.
All right. All right, good morning. Thanks everybody for being here today. My name's Dennis Oates, as Dr. Sankaranarayanan said, and I'm honored to present my dissertation defense, Supply Chain Open Innovation Exploration. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to the committee, Dr. Sankaranarayanan, Dr. Simha, and Dr. Zhang, for all the support that you guys have given me and the guidance in this journey, and also to acknowledge the leadership of Dr. Praveen through being the program director. All right, let's begin. This dissertation is organized in a two-essay format. For both essays, I will place particular emphasis on the methodology, results, and key discussions. My motivation for this research is rooted in my personal and professional journey. Early in my career, I worked for Roadway Express, a company that was once a pillar in the LTL trucking industry. I later moved on to FedEx, where I witnessed firsthand how innovation can become a source of competitive advantage, and also how the lack of it can lead to decline. The slide behind me shows the top 25 LTL trucking companies in 1980, and then also in today. And as you can see, the firms from 1980 almost no longer exist. So what happened to these firms? Why couldn't they keep pace with the rapid shifts brought on by technology, deregulation, and globalization? The lessons from industry disruption inspired me to explore this critical question. What enables supply chains to innovate and adapt in the face of uncertainty, and where do new ideas come from? I'd like to begin this with the classic definition of innovation by Schumpeter. He describes innovation not just as invention, but also as the introduction of new goods, methods, markets, organizational forms, and supply sources. This definition is foundational because it expands our understanding of innovation beyond products and technologies, emphasizing that innovation also involves how firms organize, operate, and connect with the environment. And in today's global connected supply chains, this broader view of innovation is more relevant than ever. It's the perspective that grounds this research. A foundational concept for this research is also open innovation, a term coined by Henry Chesbrough in 2003. The idea is simple but powerful. Companies don't need to rely solely on internal ideas. Instead, they can and should leverage external knowledge, whether from suppliers, customers, or even competitors, to innovate. In a supply chain context, this means tapping into the broader network of partners to develop solutions that are more agile, more responsive, and more sustainable. Open innovation becomes especially valuable in dynamic, high-pressure environments like today's global supply chains. As firms face increasing disruption from technological change, geopolitical shifts, and supply chain fragility, traditional models are simply no longer sufficient. As Tubalek and Walker and others have noted, many firms have struggled to adapt quickly, and those that didn't innovate have fallen behind. On the other hand, open innovation offers a pathway forward. As described by Chesbrough and others, it emphasizes leveraging external knowledge and collaboration to build stronger, more responsive systems. In supply chains, this means co-developing solutions with your partners, integrating external technologies, and building networks that support both resilience and sustainability. This forms the foundation for the concept I explore, supply chain open innovation capability, or as we'll call it, SCOIC. Despite growing interest in open innovation, its application in supply chain remains underexplored. Ardetto et al. 2020 showed that supplier-sourced knowledge supports innovation and ambidexterity, yet they didn't specify the capabilities needed to consistently harness this knowledge. Chu and Lin 2022 found that while governance structures matter, digital platforms are more effective in enabling knowledge co-creation in supply chains. Still, critical questions remain. What capabilities enable firms to operationalize open innovation in supply chains? And do these capabilities improve outcomes like resilience and sustainability? This study addresses these gaps by defining supply chain open innovation, SCOIC, and empirically testing its impact on key performance outcomes. In answering these questions, this dissertation is structured in 2 essays. The essay 1 focuses on determining the dimensions of supply chain open innovation capability, and essay 2 examines whether SCOIC leads to better outcomes like resilience and sustainability, and whether this relationship is influenced by external factors such as environmental uncertainty and digital maturity. Together, these essays aim to build a theoretical foundation and applied understanding of how open innovation operates in modern supply chains. All right, essay 1. Supply chain open innovation capability is grounded in TIS's dynamic capabilities framework, which emphasizes 3 core actions. The first is sensing opportunities and threats. The second is seizing them through strategic initiatives. And the third, transforming the organization to stay competitive. In supply chain, these actions align with SCOIC's core dimensions, which are network capability and collaborative competence, which are enabling the firm to sense those external opportunities, absorptive capacity, which helps seize them by acquiring and applying new knowledge, and organizational flexibility, which supports the transformation and ongoing adaptation. Together, these ideas form the foundation of SCOIC, and not just acquiring knowledge, but embedding it into the processes that enable continuous innovation across the supply chain. All right, to ground essay 1, I began with the evolving supply chain landscape. Globalization, shifting consumer demand, and rapid market changes have intensified supply chain complexity. She 2022. As a result, supply chains are not viewed as back office. They're now strategic enablers of efficiency, resilience, and sustainability. 2 critical challenges dominate this shift: sustainability, and this is the ability to manage environmental, social, and economic impacts, and resilience, the adapting to and recovering from disruptions. Open innovation has emerged as a promising solution, especially given supply chains' inherent reliance on collaboration. Yet in practice, this promise remains largely unmet. Studies reveal limited knowledge exchange and underdeveloped capabilities and inconsistent application across the sector. So if supply chains are going to use open innovation effectively, they need a well-defined set of capabilities to do so. But as we've seen in the literature is yet to clearly identify what those capabilities are. So the key question becomes, what are the dimensions that make up supply chain open innovation capability? My research model that we have developed, a theoretical model that defines supply chain open innovation capability, or SCOIC, is a multidimensional construct comprised of 4 dimensions that are based in literature. The first is collaborative competence, the second is absorptive capacity, the third, network capability, and finally, organizational flexibility. Next, I'd like to define the key constructs that make up the SCOIC model introduced in the previous slide. Starting with the focal construct, supply chain open innovation capability. This refers to an organization's ability to leverage both incoming and outgoing flows of knowledge to drive innovation across the supply chain. This builds on the work of Chu and Lin, 2022. Collaborative competence reflects a firm's ability to manage and sustain productive relationships with partners. This is based on Mishra and Shaw's work from 2009. Absorptive capacity from Flatten et al. Is defined as the ability to identify, absorb, and apply valuable external knowledge, whereas the network capability is defined by Sarwar and colleagues in 2021, related to the ability to build, nurture, and leverage networks to support knowledge flows. And then finally, organizational flexibility, based on Srivanasa and Swink 2018, is the ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. The methods. So to test this model, I conducted a cross-sectional electronic survey using Sentiment as my data panel provider and Qualtrics to house the survey instrument. Before launching the survey, I ran a power analysis using G-Power to ensure the appropriate sample size. Minimum required sample was 138. All measurement scales were 7-point Likert, adapted from previously validated scales in literature. Participants were US-based supply chain professionals with at least 2 years of decision-making experience. After cleaning for attention checks, speeders, and pattern responses, the final data set included 222 valid responses, well above the minimum and consistent with the SEM guidelines. Data analysis. To analyze the data, I used SmartPLS version 4.1.1.2, applying confirmatory factor analysis to assess the dimensionality and construct validity of the 4 first-order reflective constructs. Each dimension of SCOIC, absorptive capacity, network capability, and collaborative competence, and organizational flexibility, was treated as a reflective construct. Then SCOIC was modeled as a second-order formative construct composed of 4 dimensions, and the SCOIC was also included in the model as a standalone construct with its own reflective scales. The respondent characteristics. Of the 222 respondents that participated, all were US-based supply chain professionals with at least 2 years of experience. Starting with gender, 62% of the sample was male, which reflects the general demographic distribution of supply chain functions today. Looking at age, the largest group was aged 31 to 40, representing nearly 38% of respondents. And then the 41 to 50 and 21 to 30 age brackets followed, making this a relatively experienced and professionally active sample. In terms of education, the vast majority, over 87%, had a bachelor's degree or higher, which adds credibility to the quality responses. Regarding supply chain experience, almost 40% had less than 5 years, while about 18% had 20 years or more of experience. This provided a balanced view across the entry-level and seasoned professionals. And for job titles, respondents represented a range of roles, nearly 38% working in supply chain management, followed by operations and procurement. Overall, the sample is both diverse and appropriately targeted to address this research question. Scale items. The definitions for the constructs were already discussed earlier. This slide focuses on how they were measured in the survey instrument. Each construct was assessed using items adapted from established peer-reviewed scales, ensuring both validity and consistency with prior research. For SCOIC, I used the items from Chu and Lin 2022. For collaborative competence, this was adapted from Mishra and Shaw 2009, absorptive capacity, Flatt in 2011, network capability based on Sarwar et al. 2021, and finally, organizational flexibility was from Srinivasan and Swink 2018. All items were measured with a 7-point Likert scale, and the wording was carefully adapted for clarity and relevance to supply chain audience and went through an expert review. Indicator reliability, dimension outer loadings. Indicator reliability refers to how well individual items represent their underlying construct. In other words, it assesses whether each survey question reliably measures the concept it was intended to capture. In this slide, we see the outer loadings for the first 4 reflective constructs that make up SCOIC. All indicator loadings exceed the commonly accepted threshold of 0.70 as recommended by Hare et al. 2021, which provides strong evidence of reliability at the item level. This means that each item loads well onto its intended construct and the measurement model is robust and properly specified. So we have every one of our loadings above 0.70. Internal consistency and divergent validity. Now that we've established indicator reliability, the next step is to assess the internal consistency and validity at the construct level. Internal consistency tells us whether the items within each construct are consistently measuring the same underlying concept. This is assessed using Cronbach's alpha and composite reliability. According to Hare et al. 2021 again, values above 0.70 are acceptable. As shown here, all the constructs exceed these thresholds, indicating strong internal consistency across the board. We also evaluated convergent validity using average variance extracted. This measures how much of the variance in the item responses can be attributed to the latent construct rather than to error. Values above 0.50 is considered acceptable. Again, all constructs exceed that benchmark, suggesting that each construct is well captured by its indicators. Next, we evaluated discriminant validity, which tests whether our constructs are truly distinct from one another. We used Fornell-Larker criterion, which compares the square root of each construct's AVE, shown in the diagonal highlighted cells, with the correlations between the constructs, which are in the off-diagonal. For discriminant validity to be established, each diagonal value must be greater than the values in the corresponding row and column. This confirms that each construct shows more variance with its own items than any other construct. As shown here, all constructs meet that criteria. For example, absorptive capacity is 0.839, which exceeds the correlations with all other constructs. This gives us further confidence that each of the dimensions of SCOIC is conceptually distinct and the model is valid for structural analysis. Dimensions and weight. As recommended by Hare et al. 2021, significant testing for formative indicators was conducted using bootstrapping to assess whether each dimension makes a meaningful contribution to the higher order construct. This table represents the path weights, t-values, and p-values for each of the four formative dimensions of SCOIC. All dimensions are statistically significant with p-values below the 0.05 threshold. Collaborative competence and network capability exhibit the strongest contributions with weights of 0.352 and 0.325 respectively, and highly significant p-values. Absorptive capacity also contributed meaningfully with a weight of 0.214 and a p-value of 0.001. Organizational flexibility, while having the smallest weight at 0.139, is still a statistically significant contributor. Together, these results provide empirical support for the multidimensional structure of SCOIC. All right, structural model of SCOIC explanatory power. The model explains 68% of the variance of SCOIC, as shown by the R-squared value of 0.680. According to Hare et al., an R-squared greater than 0.50 indicates substantial explanatory power, giving us strong confidence in the model's robustness. All right, discussion and key findings. This slide highlights the main takeaways from the study. First, the results validate SCOIC as a second-order construct composed of the four dimensions. This structure reflects the multidimensional nature of innovation capability in supply chains. Second, the model provides strong empirical support, explaining 68% of the variance in SCOIC. And third, this research integrates prior work by combining otherwise fragmented constructs into a more holistic model of supply chain innovation capabilities, drawing from foundational contributions from Cohen and Leventhal, Gulati, and Volberda. Finally, the findings demonstrate alignment with dynamic capabilities. Specifically, the model illustrates how SCOIC enables firms to effectively sense, seize, and transform actions that are central to maintaining competitiveness in fast-changing environments. Implications for research. This study opens the door for several promising research directions. First, the findings highlight the relative importance of each dimension, with collaborative confidence and network capability contributing the most significantly to the second-order SCOIC construct. This allows future research to explore why certain dimensions may matter more under different contexts and contingencies. Second, the study provides a validated model that can be used to examine relationships between SCOIC and a variety of performance outcomes, such as sustainability and resilience. Third, it enables comparative cross-context and longitudinal studies. For example, examining how innovation capabilities affect resilience and sustainability across industries or regions. And finally, it supports the development of models testing mediators and moderators, such as organizational culture or environmental turbulence that may shape the relationship between SCOIC and the outcome variables. Implications for practice. This study offers several practical takeaways for supply chain leaders who are aiming to enhance innovation performance by strengthening their capability development. First, SCOIC can be positioned as a strategic lens. It allows leaders to systematically diagnose and develop innovation capabilities across their supply chain. Second, the model provides a roadmap that leaders can use to align innovation capability development within their broader operational strategic goals. And finally, it helps leaders prioritize by highlighting the relative importance of each of the 4 SCOIC dimensions: absorptive capacity, collaborative competence, network capability, and organizational flexibility. This model gives leaders an ability to focus on what area of that capacity building they want their efforts and their investments to drive impact. All right, next we're going to move on to SA2. SA2 is titled, Do Open Innovation Capabilities and Contextual Factors Influence Resilience and Sustainability in Global Supply Chains? Again, this was a 2 SA model, so we've moved from the dimensions to now SA2. We're going to take a look at what are the impact of SCOIC on some performance outcomes. All right, SA2 context and literature. We're going to begin with 2 outcome variables that are especially critical for today's supply chains. The first is supply chain sustainability, which involves integrating environmental, social, and economic concerns to deliver long-term stakeholder value. And second is supply chain resilience, the capability to adapt to and recover from disruptions. Bridging SCOIC to these outcomes is the concept of supply chain ambidexterity, or the ability to balance exploitation and exploration. This ambidexterity is essential for enabling both resilience and sustainability in complex and fast-changing environments. Lastly, we identified 2 contextual factors that may shape how SCOIC influences outcomes. The first being environmental uncertainty, which refers to the unpredictability in the external environment and heightens the need for flexibility and adaptation. And the second being digital transformation maturity, the degree to which organizations have adopted and integrated digital technologies to enhance agility and performance. Together, these elements set the stage for SA2 by outlining the theoretical relationships between SCOIC, key supply chain outcomes, and the broader contextual landscape. All right, the gap. This slide highlights the research gap addressed in SA2. First, we lack a clear understanding of how integrated capability systems like SCOIC impact outcomes such as resilience and sustainability. Most studies examine capabilities in the silos. Second, ambidexterity's role as a mediator is underexplored. While it's been conceptually acknowledged, few studies empirically test how it explains SCOIC's impact on outcomes. Third, contextual factors like environmental uncertainty and digital transformation maturity are rarely considered, despite their likely influence on capability effectiveness. So why does this gap matter? Without a systems view, firms may miss how capabilities interact to drive results, and without accounting for context, models may not translate well into real-world practice. This study addresses these gaps by modeling how SCOIC influences resilience and sustainability, testing ambidexterity as a moderator, and including environmental uncertainty and digital transformation maturity as contextual moderators. That brings us to our research questions. The first one being, what are the influences of SCOIC on supply chain resiliency and sustainability? And the second one being, what role do contextual factors play in the influence of supply chain open innovation capability on supply chain resilience and sustainability? The research model. At the center of the model is SCOIC, right, which is the supply chain open innovation capability, which serves as the foundational construct driving performance outcomes. We position supply chain ambidexterity as the key mediating mechanism, creating a relationship between SCOIC and the 2 critical supply chain outcomes, resilience and sustainability. The framework also incorporates the 2 contextual factors, digital transformation maturity and environmental uncertainty, as potential moderators that may influence how these relationships play out. We'll walk through each of these hypotheses and construct definitions in detail in the following slides. All right, scale items. To support our research model, the slide outlines key constructs included in the study, along with their definition, measurement scales, and representative survey items. To begin with, SCOIC, we use, again, Chu and Lin, 2022. Supply chain resilience, one of our dependent variables, refers to the ability to adapt and recover from disruption. We adopt this scale from Golgecki et al., 2016. Supply chain sustainability focuses on the integration of environmental, social, and economic considerations. We use Hussein et al. 2016 as the source. The mediating construct supply chain ambidexterity captures the firm's capability to balance exploitation and exploration, and we use Crystal et al. 2010. And then we also include two moderators, the first being digital transformation maturity, which assesses how well digital technologies are embedded into the supply chain operations. We use the scale from Romane et al. 2017, and environmental uncertainty is measured using the scale from Luig and Borisov 2014, which evaluates the predictability of external conditions. Hypothesis. All right, so we're going to run through these. So the first one, SCOIC will be positively associated with ambidexterity, supply chain ambidexterity. Firms with strong SCOIC are better equipped to assess, assimilate, and apply external knowledge, which enhances their ability to simultaneously exploit existing capabilities and explore new innovations. Hypothesis 2 is supply chain ambidexterity positively mediates the relationship between SCOIC and supply chain resilience. The rationale here is by fostering both efficiency and adaptability, ambidexterity enables supply chains to transform the external knowledge gained through SCOIC into practices that improve disruption readiness and recovery speed. Hypothesis 3, supply chain ambidexterity positively mediates the relationship between SCOIC and supply chain sustainability. The rationale here is ambidextrous supply chains can leverage SCOIC to embed sustainable initiatives into ongoing operations while also experimenting new sustainable innovations with new sustainable innovations, thus aligning short-term efficiency with long-term sustainability goals. 4, digital transformation maturity positively moderates the relationship between supply chain ambidexterity and supply chain resilience. The rationale here is digitally mature firms are better able to sense, respond, and adapt quickly to disruptions, strengthening the relationships between ambidextrous capabilities and resilience outcomes. Hypothesis 5, digital transformation maturity positively moderates the relationship between supply chain ambidexterity and supply chain sustainability. Rationale here is advanced digital systems enable traceability, data visibility, and controls necessary to implement and scale sustainably focused innovations. Hypothesis 6, environmental uncertainty positively moderates the relationships between supply chain ambidexterity and supply chain resilience. The rationale here is in uncertain environments, the dual capacity of ambidexterity becomes more valuable as firms must simultaneously stabilize current operations and innovate to mitigate unforeseen risks. And then the final hypothesis 7 is environmental uncertainty negatively moderates the relationship between supply chain ambidexterity and supply chain sustainability. The rationale here is under high uncertainty, firms may tend to deprioritize long-term sustainable initiatives in favor of immediate operational responses, weakening the ability of ambidexterity to deliver sustainable outcomes. All right, methods. The study followed the same methodological approach as SA1. It was the same survey that was used. But for analysis, slightly different, right? So for data analysis for SA2, again, we use Smart PLS version 4.1.1.2, applying a two-step approach consistent with the guidelines in PLS SEM. First, we conducted measurement model evaluation. This assessed construct reliability, validity using multiple indicators. And then second, we proceeded to the structural model evaluation to test our hypothesis relationships. We used bootstrapping with 5,000 samples to assess the significance alongside examining R-squared, path coefficients, and the mediation moderation effects in our specified model. Dimension outer loadings. Our outer loadings reflect the strength of the relationship between the observed items and the underlying construct. As shown, all loadings exceed the recommended threshold of 0.70 based on guidelines from Hare et al. 2021, indicating strong indicator reliability across the board. This suggests that the items used reliably measure the intended constructs, providing confidence in the measurement model. Reliability and convergent validity. Starting with Cronbach's alpha, all values exceed the acceptable threshold of 0.70, with most above 0.80, indicating good internal consistency, Hare et al. Again. This confirms that that the items within each construct are measuring the same underlying concept. Next, we examined composite reliability, all met the benchmark. And lastly, we looked at average variance extracted. All values were above 0.50, which supports convergent validity. Together, these metrics confirm that our measurement model demonstrates both strong reliability and convergent validity, establishing a solid foundation for structural model evaluation. Dimension discriminant validity, we used Forner-Larker again. According to this method, the discriminant validity is supported when the square root of the average variance extracted for each construct, highlighted in blue, exceeds all the correlations between the constructs and any other row or column. Again, this is Hare et al. 2021. As shown for each construct, they meet this criteria. This result supports the presence of discriminant validity, indicating the constructs are empirically distinct from one another. Again, an essential requirement for ensuring conceptual clarity and measurement accuracy in the model. All right, heterotrait monotrait ratio of correlations is another criteria to establish discriminant validity, and it is particularly useful in PLS-SEM. According to Hare et al., HTMT values below 0.85 indicate adequate discriminant validity between the constructs. As shown here, all inter-construct HTMT values fall below that threshold, confirming that each construct is empirically distinct from the others. All right, before presenting the results, it's important to address common method bias, or CMB. CMB refers to the potential distortion in results that can occur when data for both independent and dependent variables are collected from the same source at the same time, such as through a single survey. This can inflate or deflate observed relationships and threaten the validity of our findings. To mitigate the test for CMB, we used a multi-prong approach based on the established literature. First, we applied the marker variable technique, Podzikoff 2003. We included unrelated NFL perception items in the survey and found that they did not explain significant variance in our main constructs, suggesting minimal influence of method bias. Second, we used the measured latent marker variable, MLMV, approach, Chin et al. And Ronco-Yalalto 2011, modeling the NFL perception items as latent factors linked to the core constructs. The resulting path coefficients were all small and non-significant. Lastly, we assessed multicollinearity using the variance inflation factor as recommended by Koch and Lin 2012. All VIF values were comfortably below the conservative threshold of 3.3, with the highest recorded at 2.857. In conclusion, across both marker variable tests and the VIF analysis, we found no evidence of common method bias, reinforcing the confidence in the validity of our structural model. All right, hypothesis test results. And we're going to go through each one of the hypotheses and talk about whether it was supported or not. So H1, which is we found that there was a significant relationship between SCOIC and supply chain ambidexterity. And so that was supported with a beta weight of 0.749. For hypothesis 2, which is the confirming supply chain ambidexterity significantly mediates the relationship between SCOIC and supply chain resilience, we found support for that as well too. For hypothesis 3, we also saw that that is supported, showing mediation between SCOIC and supply chain sustainability. Hypothesis 4, which proposed that digital transformation maturity strengthens the relationship between ambidexterity and resilience, we found that that was not supported. For hypothesis 5, which is the linking of digital transformation maturity to the ambidexterity sustainability relationship, was also not supported. Hypothesis 6 is supported, indicating that environmental uncertainty positively moderates the relationship between supply chain ambidexterity and resilience. And then finally, hypothesis 7 was not supported, and this was the interaction between environmental uncertainty and ambidexterity that does not significantly affect supply chain sustainability. In terms of variance explained, the model accounts for approximately 59% of the variance in supply chain resilience and nearly 50% in supply chain sustainability, indicating strong explanatory power. All right, as shown in Table 1, H1 through H3 were supported, indicating that SCOIC significantly enhances supply chain ambidexterity, which in turn has a positive impact on both resilience and sustainability. H4, 5, and 7 were not supported. However, H6 did receive support, suggesting that environmental uncertainty strengthens the relationship between ambidexterity and resilience. One other additional finding that's worth calling out, while digital transformation maturity did not significantly moderate the focal relationships in H4 or H5, it did have a strong and significant main effect on supply chain sustainability. This suggests that regardless of the interaction with ambidexterity, higher levels of digital maturity on their own can directly improve sustainability outcomes. In other words, organizations that are further along their digital transformation journey are more likely to achieve supply chain sustainability, likely due to better data integration, process automation, and visibility into environmental and social performance metrics. All right, now let's turn to the key takeaways from our hypothesis testing. First, we find strong evidence that SCOIC significantly enhances supply chain ambidexterity. This reinforces the view that information coordination capability is foundational to develop ambidextrous capabilities, supporting exploration and exploration simultaneously as part of the dynamic capabilities framework. Second, ambidexterity positively influences both resilience and sustainability outcomes. This reinforces its important mediating role, linking innovation, capability development to downstream performance benefits. Third, we observe that environmental uncertainty positively moderates the relationship between ambidexterity and resilience. This suggests that the benefits of being ambidextrous are amplified in the more volatile, complex, and ambiguous environments, where firms need to pivot quickly and recover effectively. However, no significant moderation effect was found between uncertainty and sustainability. One possible explanation is that in high uncertainty conditions, firms might deprioritize longer-term sustainability efforts in favor of short-term recovery and operational resilience. Finally, while digital transformation maturity did not moderate the focal relationships as hypothesized, it was found to have a significant and positive direct effect on supply chain sustainability. This suggests that more digitally mature firms tend to perform better on sustainable measures independent of their ambidexterity. That's likely because digital maturity enables better visibility, traceability, and data-driven decision-making across supply chains. All right, implications for research. This study contributes to both theory and future research directions in several meaningful ways. First, it validates SCOIC as a multidimensional construct, providing a structured and reliable foundation for future empirical studies to consistently measure and explore its role across different contexts. Second, the research strengthens the relationship between open innovation and dynamic capabilities, especially as they relate to supply chain resilience and sustainability. This opens up theoretical advancement in how firms navigate complex environments through capability development. Third, the findings reveal important contextual nuances. Specifically, we see that environmental uncertainty enhances the impact of ambidexterity on resilience, highlighting the importance of situational and contingency-based approaches in supply chain research. And then fourth, the results paved the way for comparative research across industries, geographies, and environmental conditions. And finally, the study encourages longitudinal research to examine how these capabilities evolve over time and how they influence long-term performance. This is essential in understanding the capability development as an ongoing strategic process. Implications for practice. First, it emphasizes the need to invest in SCOIC capabilities, such as collaboration, absorptive capacity, network strength, flexibility. These build the foundation for the innovation readiness and long-term resilience. Second, organizations must learn to balance efficiency and exploration by fostering ambidexterity, particularly in volatile environments where agility and innovation are both critical. Third, digital transformation maturity has a direct impact on sustainability. Firms should leverage digital tools, not just for operational gains, but to enable traceability and informed decision-making in alignment with their sustainability goals. And to bring this full circle, let me take you back to the personal motivation that started the research. Reflecting on my decades in the transportation sector, I saw firsthand how industry leadership shifted from legacy giants like Roadway Express or Consolidated Freightways to digitally forward adaptive firms like FedEx. FedEx's consistent investment in digital platforms, collaborative innovation, and agile logistics helped it not only survive and thrive through major disruptions. This adaptability and long-term thinking embodies the capabilities this study identifies as essential. So while the research is grounded in theory, it's also rooted in real-world experience. Limitations. Let me get back to limitations. As we reflect on the finding, it's important to acknowledge several limitations that may affect interpretation. First is geographic scope. This is the survey was US-centric. We surveyed US-based supply chain folks. Second, the study relies on cross-sectional design. This provides a snapshot in time which limits our ability to observe how SCOIC capabilities and performance outcomes evolve or interact longitudinally. And finally, construct scope. SCOIC was modeled using 4 validated dimensions based on the current literature. However, additional dimensions or contextual variables may also be relevant and should be considered in future research to enrich the construct further. All right, future research. Building on our findings, this study highlights several promising directions for future research to extend and refine SCOIC framework across different contexts, methodologies, and emerging capabilities. First, future studies should aim to replicate this model internationally. Second, longitudinal research is essential to capture how these capabilities evolve and impact resilience and sustainability over time. Third, there's room to explore new moderators, including market turbulence, digital integration, maturity, or even supply chain complexity, to better understand the conditions under which SCOIC exerts greater or lesser influence. Additionally, we recommend refining the SCOIC construct by incorporating emerging dimensions such as sustainability orientation or AI-enabled innovation to align these evolving industry trends. And finally, researchers should explore the potential trade-offs between resilience and sustainability, especially under different types of crisis such as economic shocks or climate-related disruptions, offering a more nuanced understanding of the capability prioritization under stress. In conclusion, this research was structured across the 2 essays. Essay 1 defined and validated supply chain open innovation capability, or SCOIC. It consists of those 4 foundational dimensions: absorptive capacity, network capability, collaborative confidence, and organizational flexibility. Essay 2 demonstrated that SCOIC significantly drives ambidexterity, enabling firms to balance exploration and exploitation. This ambidexterity in turn enhances both resilience and sustainability, particularly under the conditions of environmental uncertainty, where the relationship becomes stronger for resilience. In terms of research contribution, the study extends the dynamic capabilities perspective into the supply chain domain. It provides a tested and structured model for linking innovation and performance outcomes under varying environmental conditions. And finally, on a personal level, this work offers a research-backed model that I can now bring into the classroom and into real-world practice. As a professor, a consultant, or even as a coach, it equips me to help supply chain leaders build more adaptive, innovative, and sustainable systems, precisely what today's uncertain world demands. And as I close, I'd like to take a moment to sincerely thank the many people who have supported me throughout my journey. First, to my committee, thank you for your guidance and challenges, your belief in my work. Your mentorship has helped shape not just this dissertation, but the scholar that I've become. To the faculty and staff at UW-Whitewater, thanks for creating an environment where intellectual curiosity could thrive. And to my cohorts members, you've been a sounding board, thought partner, and lifeline. I enjoyed the laughs along the way, and most importantly, to my family, thank you for your unwavering love and patience through the last 3 years. And with that, any questions?
Thank you, Dennis. Excellent presentation. I'll start off with the questions, and the other committee members will join in after me. So you talked about all the practical implications of your work, and it's amazing that you're able to tie it back to your original example, right? That you started out with. So my first question is, how did you think about this idea for your dissertation? So what was the motivation? I mean, you talked about the motivation, but then specifically SCOIC or ambidexterity and those kinds of constructs.
So the question is, like, how did I come up with the idea?
Yeah.
Having spent 30 years in industry, like I go back to Roadway. At the time when I worked at Roadway, it was the largest trucking company in the United States. 2 years ago, through a bunch of mergers and acquisitions, it's now, bankrupt and out of business, right? And so the question that I saw along that, as I was thinking about this, and the other companies that I worked for, whether it's FedEx or whether it was Amazon, how do these companies continue, why are they able to come up with ideas and to be able to put those ideas in place? And this was this idea of where do, innovation, where do ideas come from? And really it was something that was sitting in the back of my mind, and the first day that I walked in is I had like this thought of like, where do ideas come from? And then going through the 2 years of classwork, and then building up to what the research question was, it was always sitting back there. And then going through the different classes that I had, I've started revolving it. You're reading the literature, and where I took it from a practical standpoint with my years of experience in industry, to be able to say, now I can see what's happening in literature, and these two make sense, and I can see these connections. And then that's really what fed that idea of where do ideas come from, that led me to like this idea of open innovation, pulling ideas from your suppliers, pulling ideas from your partners to be able to figure out how to move forward.
Wonderful, thank you. So you talked about the two moderators. This is a specific question about the model, by the way. So the environmental uncertainty had one of the effects, that panned out. The digital transformation maturity did not work as a moderator, but it had a main effect, which you talked about. So why do you think it didn't work as a moderator?
And this, obviously we could do more study on this, but my thought on that is that digital transformation maturity has become like table stakes in industry at this point. And it's like we don't see differentiation between companies with digital transformation maturity. And so that's why I think we saw it as a direct effect, but it didn't moderate the ambidexterity. So I think it's the lack of companies now, basically a lot of them have moved along the curve of digital transformation maturity, and we don't see that differentiation.
Okay, gotcha. So it kind of washes out, I guess. That's what you're arguing for. Okay, very good. So my last question is, in terms of your practical implications, and these are excellent. So we do see that capabilities will take time to develop, right? I mean, it's not going to be we get started and then we can build all these things in such a short time. Do you think smaller firms or startup firms will have the same advantages as larger firms in this case? I know you're controlling for those things, but what do you think?
I think both will have the advantages. I mean, the benefit of a large, I think to my times at FedEx or at Amazon, hey, the ability to get funded to go to conferences or something like that, to be able to, I think that could be an advantage. But at the same side, typically smaller firms are, outsourcing potentially more of what they do, just because of the nature of where they are, which gives them more interaction, at touch points with their suppliers. And each one of those touch points is a potential, knowledge inflow with ideas and stuff like that. So I don't know, it would be an interesting kind of study to go back and take a look at, large versus small, and does it make a difference? And I'm not quite sure at this point.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. I'll turn it over to Adi next.
Yeah, great presentation, Dennis. So my first question for you is, when you were working on the model itself, was there a particular finding that you thought might possibly startle you? Like, were you expecting any unexpected findings?
The one that I thought was unexpected was I thought, let me pop back to it, is the moderating effect of environmental uncertainty on the connection between, the relationship between ambidexterity and sustainability. Like, I thought, and the way we had it, the hypothesis was set up, that would have, as environmental uncertainty goes up, you would see a reduction in sustainability, where firms would be like, I got to worry about what's going on today as opposed to the future. Or what's wrong, or sustainability, which may or may not tie directly into profit. And I thought it was interesting that it wasn't supported. And so that's an area where I'm like, I pause, and I'd like to do a little bit more research on that.
And then, have you identified any journals where you want to send your essays out to?
I definitely was thinking about this, and so my questions, and when we're done, I'd love to talk to all of you guys about this, is, there's a couple of supply chain journals I think could be interesting for maybe SA2. Is there like an innovation journal where SA1 could fit into? But yeah, I'm definitely going down the path of trying to identify which journals to put these in.
And this is like not really related as much, it's a bit more peripheral. So that initial graph you showed, right, the companies that no longer exist, is it possible that some of those companies have taken on new names, or have they been completely, are they just extinct now?
There are some that have taken on new names. Let me go back, and the majority of them it's extinct. And so the interesting thing that happened, and it might be a little bit inside baseball, but you saw tremendous change that happened from the 1980s through to today. One of the big ones was deregulation. And so a lot of these firms were set up as utilities. The trucking companies were utilities back in the 1980s, which it was easy living for these guys. They didn't have a problem to do any, and they didn't have to do anything. And then once deregulation hit, they didn't have the capabilities in-house to be able to make changes. And you also had almost every one of these firms are legacy Teamster firms, where you had huge burdens on, like the benefit packages that had been negotiated and stuff like that. And so almost every one of these firms, Roadway Express, the LTL portion of it's out of business, but Roadway spun off a company called RPS that became FedEx Ground, so it's part of FedEx. So there are parts of it that have spun off, but that core LTL business, most of these companies are out of business.
The only one that kind of retained its name is ABF.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all the questions I have. So,
great presentation, Dennis. And I know it takes a lot of effort to go to this journey at this moment. And I'm thinking about for the first step on the paper, because now this is the end for the dissertation. The next step is what is the next journey to the paper? And my first question or the first comment is, I also realized there are measurement items for the supply chain open innovation construct already, and then we propose the 4 additional dimensions. And we may need to provide some additional evidence in addition to the literature why these 4 dimensions will really measure the supply chain open innovation capability. So that's one thing to write in the manuscript. And then the second is, when I went over the model, I also think about the theory. And in the whole presentation, you mentioned the theory at the last slide, but the whole model may not be driven by the theory. Have you thought about any additional theory to derive the relationship, especially the supply chain ambidexterity and also the supply chain sustainability and also the resilience?
So the question is there, as opposed to like dynamic capabilities, is there another theory that could underlie the model? It's a great question. I'd have to give that a little bit of thought. I kind of put my, my focus has been on what's going on, but thinking through this, what other theories could interact with that? I'm actually drawing a blank right now, Jay. So let me come back around on that.
And that's fine. This is just a conversation base. And actually, I'm thinking there may be some potential theories that we can use to derive the model, particularly the resource-based view that may explain the environmental uncertainty, and also the digital maturation capability as well. And that's the academic question. And then my last question is more personal. What is your biggest challenge when you go over this journey, and how you overcome this challenge?
Oh, of getting a DBA?
This challenge in this whole journey?
What has been getting started? I mean, I'll flip it around a little bit of like what was, I was thinking about this on the way in, and I think the best piece of advice I was given, and it was given at like one of the first sessions, was, I can't remember, it was like Steve Schlabel or somebody was up there talking, and they said, just follow the process, just follow the process. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. But now that I'm standing here, I'm like, I just followed the process, right? Every time there was a step, I wasn't quite sure exactly what was going on when I was starting, and then you get through it, and then you get the next piece, and then you realize, oh, this is how this fits together, right? And that advice of follow the process was very important for me to be able to get to where, finalizing this, hopefully.
Okay, that's all. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. Any questions from folks in the audience? Yeah, just switch on the mic, yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. It's really interesting study. So I can see how your industry insights really contribute to the whole generation of this idea. So I wonder more practically, so let's say if a supply chain manager of Amazon comes to you and asks you, hey, so you know so much about the open innovation capability, how do I really strengthen the capability of my company? So what would be your piece of advice based on your research?
Yeah, and I've actually have had conversations with folks that I consult with about this as well too. And one of the things I think is really cool is, organizational flexibility had the lowest beta weights, right? And then the two that had the highest, collaborative competence and network capability, those are like skills that, so if I'm going to prioritize those capabilities, those would be the ones that I'm going to go after. And one of the things that a lot of people that I've seen in industry that happen is people don't want to share with suppliers, right? And so it's, we have our own stuff, the suppliers over there, it's a very transactional relationship. Well, if you can actually work with suppliers and you can create this network capability, or you have this ability to collaborate with your suppliers, these are the capabilities that lead you to open innovation, right? And so from a practical standpoint, given that these are the ones that carry the most significant or the highest level, the beta weights associated with that, like I would start off with those two because they're pretty simple, right? If you're in a procurement function, how do you be more collaborative with your suppliers? And there's different, specific tactics you can do to get down that, and you can start creating those capabilities.
Thank you. So for that, I think the network capability is really interesting. So when you say really work with your suppliers, do you mean that strengthen, work more closely with a few of the suppliers or work with more suppliers?
If you're not working with any, I would start, to begin. But I think the more along the spectrum that you can get, working with suppliers, having this ability to be able to collaborate. Like I've done work in business where, hey, this supplier, I might not be using them right now, but they know that down the road there could be an opportunity. And so we're still collaborative, even though we're not doing business at this point. So it's not just working with one, but having this collaborative kind of approach to the set of suppliers that you have, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, great presentation, Dennis. Very interesting area. I do have one comment. Speaking of publication, I've published in the innovation space. This is a very strong study, probably somewhere like Journal of Product and Innovation Management would be a good outlet, and it's an A-star. It's very highly regarded. But I would say you would probably need to combine both essays if you want like a strong publication. I think whenever you send papers now, they ask, have you used the data before? And I'm worried if you use just the first essay somewhere, then when you go with the second essay, they will just kind of, maybe not look at it as seriously. And your findings together is really powerful. So, that would be my advice. Just if you want to make maximal impact in some way, top journal, I think, it's really amazing. So, very good. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Praveen. Yeah. You have a question? No. Good deal. Thank you so much. I think that concludes the dissertation defense. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you, Dennis.
All right.